The lead headline of some of the papers this morning is about the cholera outbreak in Lagos. The Vanguard newspaper, for instance, leads with cholera. Death toll hits 21 in Lagos, 401 cases recorded. LWC issues red alert over untreated water in circulation. Lagos Island, Ikorodu, Koshofe, Etiosa, worst hit. PSP on 24-hour waste evacuation. No surge of cases in lawsuits, according to the CMD, while Lagos is prone to cholera outbreaks. Details of that you'll find on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. The Nigerian Tribune has the same story. Cholera death toll hits 21 in Lagos. Cases rise to 401. Lagos Island, Koshofe, Etiosa record highest numbers. Epidemiologists warns against use of carbonated drink, seasoning for treatment. FG begins water quality analysis to control outbreak. Ogun NMA counsels residents to imbibe preventive measures, threatens strike over shortage of doctors. Details of that story you'll find on page 2. This Nigeria newspaper also has the same story. Cholera, Lagos issues health advisory to parents, schools. Ogun, Edo, others direct school heads to prevent spread. The lead story is on page 4 of the paper. The angle of the Guardian newspaper this morning is different. A ticking time bomb. How poor health, food inflation complicates cholera outbreak. Find details of that story on pages 4 and 5. And right under that one, among other stories, cholera death toll rises to 21 in Lagos as FG hurries to test water samples. Details on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Another story leading the headlines is on the front page of Daily Trust. Kano Emirates court leaves contenders in limbo, says Governor Yusuf's actions of May 23 null void. Ruling affirmed Bayero's deposition. AG asks police to evict 15th emir. Judges' decisions strange, confusing, according to Professor Yajudu. Find the details of that story on the inside pages. Daily Independent has the same story. Kano government says Sanusi remains emir despite court judgment. Asks police to eject Ado Bayero from Nasarawa Mini Palace. Details continue on the inside pages of the paper this morning. The Daily Times newspaper leads with, "Let Nigerians breathe." PRP tells Tinubu that's about economic hardship, wants FG to develop homegrown alternative to IMF, World Bank economic policies, says Tinubu administration clueless, tactless, mission visionless. The details you find on page 3 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. The Nigerian Observer has this one. Households seek alternatives to tomato stew amid soaring prices. Well, the details of that one continue on the inside pages, right above the nameplate. Nigeria, South Africa to work together to address both countries' challenges through trade, economic strategies. As Tinubu confirms bilateral meeting with Ramaphosa. The details on the front page continues on the inside pages. Those are some of the papers we have for you this morning.
Big story is the Kano Emirate tussle, which we'll also take a look at here on the program today. But the front page of Vanguard newspaper, it just tucked in right there, a little bit above that lead story, is a notice, a report that everyone in this country should pay serious attention to. It says jihadists are flooding Nigeria through Benin Republic. And that's it, a report is off of this research that this group say they have done here this morning. The name of the group It's called, Killingen Deal Institute, which is a Dutch think tank. They say they've done extensive research on this matter, and they find that these extremists, particularly countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic, all those areas there, which of course it's particularly affected with terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, expanding their influence and carrying out attacks on government forces and civilians. But for them to have said they're coming into flooding, that's the word they used here, flooding Nigeria through Benin Republic, which is an area where everyone would least expect, because there isn't an active zone for that. But this might have proven all of that wrong. So the report here is indicating that they've settled in Kanji Lake National Park in Niger State and Kebbi States. And they're saying evidence suggests that this involves the, I think they call them Sahelian extremists. And so we really should have a look at this. Probably the NSA's office and all the security agencies need to grab a copy and look at this. It is important.
That certainly should not be something that's too difficult to believe when you know the fact that, you know, a Nigerian military airplane was downed in the forest of Niger State some time back, and we lost, you know, significant number of soldiers to a surprise attack in one of the forests also in Niger State as well. So that story is not something that should be treated with levity. I hope that the authorities are taking a look at that report and also not just reassuring citizens, but actually doing the work that will reassure citizens that they have that area under control. But the story I would like to highlight this morning is on the front page of New Telegraph. New Telegraph has, in fact, there are two of them, but they're closely related. Look at this. DMO, Nigeria's total public debt, now 121.67 trillion naira. That's what the DMO is telling us. Remember, before now, we had been told that we don't have a debt problem. All we have is a revenue problem. Is that still the situation? I mean, do we have a sustainable way of paying down this debt, or at least servicing it in such a way that it doesn't significantly impact our revenues? But the DMO is helping us, you know, keep tabs on the debt, but closely related with it, because it also affects cost of living and affects planning for the future. Is this story? Minimum wage negotiation may impact on pension funds. What sort of impact will minimum wage negotiation have on the pension fund? Is it that, you know, the monies will go up? And then for those who are currently receiving pensions right now, given the current state of inflation in the country, what is currently being done about the pension that a lot of people are getting? Because right now, you know, if the inflation is making nonsense of the pension that people are supposed to, you know, the projected pension that people are supposed to receive, it's going to make people a little less, you know, likely, in spite of the laws that are in place, to want to commit their funds to pension managers. There needs to be buffers and safeguards in place for pensioners who are currently receiving pension, and you know, perhaps for those who will receive pension in future, like you and I, Chamberlain.
Oh dear.
Because there are big questions as to what it is you're currently earning now, and putting aside, you're putting it aside with the expectation that perhaps a bag of rice will still be around a certain amount of money, fish will still cost around a certain amount of money, etc., etc. But if these are not the projections, if by the time you retire, your money is totally worthless as a result of, you know, inflationary trends, some people will argue that it will not remain forever. But this is, you know, nobody saw this particular type of inflation coming in right now, and how the current pensioners are dealing with it. Are there conversations around putting in buffer and in such a way that when this sort of situation happens, those who are currently receiving their pensions are protected? These are questions that we need to ask.
It's not on Labour's bucket list.
Well, you can't blame them, because they're still arguing for those who are currently receiving their salaries, who do not even have enough to take home. But the fortune that those ones still have on their side is that they still have some strength. They can still work. What about those who cannot work, who have expended their youth and their strength in totality? What then happens to them? Big question. Ayo.
Yeah, most certainly a big question. Reminds me of one of that line in the old national anthem, the labors of our heroes past. What is happening to it right now? And I think it's in the same spirit that the Guardian newspaper, for instance, draws attention to ASU warning of imminent strike and bemoaning the federal government's insincerity. That story is right there under the cholera story in Lagos. Right there on the front page. ASU warns of imminent strike, bemoans FG's insincerity. That right now. That same story, the angle, the twist of the Daily Trust newspaper to it is different. Governors turned varsities into constituency projects. That's also according to ASU. And it's not just ASU that is crying wolf. If you go to the front pages of a number of other papers this morning, you see a similar story, similar concern being raised by SANU and NASU, talking about withheld salaries on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper, right under the nameplate. SANU, NASU give 2-week ultimatum over what? Unpaid salaries, by the federal government. And that story is everywhere. So I'm wondering whether we are even giving attention. The Nigerian Tribune has the same story right under the picture on the front page. SANU NASU give FG 2 weeks to pay 4 months withheld salaries, threaten to shut down varsities. So someone ought to be doing something. What is happening? Why does it seem like we're not giving enough attention to these, what the Guardian this morning calls another story, ticking time bomb? It sounds like we're not giving enough attention to these because they're not important to us. We understand that Nigeria is cash-strapped, and from what story you highlighted, Mark, 121 billion or trillion naira is no mean amount of money, to say that, okay, the federal government of Nigeria owes at any given point in time. So it is something to give attention to. It is something for us to be really, really concerned about. 121.67 trillion naira, definitely not something to toy with. But the Guardian newspaper is pointing attention to it, and 2 or 3 other newspapers are pointing attention to this particular story, and those are just not the only papers. A number of others raise these issues. So who is paying attention so that we can actually give meaning to our education? Enough of these threats of strike and counter-strike by 3 major unions in our ivory towers. From what I understand, the ivory towers is the brain of any nation. And for us to be treating it this way means we don't even respect ourselves. We don't respect our future. That's the way it sounds to me, guys. I don't know what you think, about this Chemilin and Malcolm, but maybe it's something we'll have to look at some other time. In the meantime, let's take a short break. When we return, it's time for us to delve into the issues. Stay with us.